welcome to our deep dive into the Dominican Republic's economy.
Sounds fascinating.
You've given us a stack of research on this interesting concept of informality.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, all the economic activity that happens outside of, government regulation. And get this,
Yeah.
in the DR, we're talking about more than half the entire workforce.
Wow, that's a huge.
Yeah, it's really surprising.
It's a common misconception that economic growth will just automatically solve this problem.
Yeah.
But the research shows that in the DR, despite growth, the percentage of informal workers has stayed pretty stubbornly high, around 58% for over a decade.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a deeply rooted structural issue. It's not just a matter of people trying to, avoid paying taxes.
So are you saying if we were to just walk down a random street in Santo Domingo, chances are we're seeing more informal workers than formal workers?
Exactly. Think about your small family businesses, your street vendors, independent contractors. They're like the backbone of a lot of these communities.
Right.
And, the vast majority of these, we're talking almost 99.8%, are micro businesses or just self-employed individuals.
So that really puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
And it's not about abstract numbers, right? We're talking about people's livelihoods.
Right.
And I noticed the research highlights that over half of these micro businesses are making less than RD $40,000 a month before expenses even.
Right. And, it's a tough reality. To understand it better, I think we need to look at where this informality is concentrated.
Okay.
In the DR, the biggest sectors are agriculture, construction, retail, and transportation. And these often involve things like low productivity, seasonal work, or rely heavily on migrant labor, which you can imagine makes regulation a lot more challenging.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're not likely to find many informal workers in the public sector or big corporations.
Exactly. The face of informality in the DR is more likely to be, like we were saying, a farmer, a construction worker, or someone selling goods on the street.
Makes sense.
And, this connects to another key point. The research highlights education plays a huge role.
They found a direct link.
Yes, the less education someone has, the more likely they are to be working in the informal economy. And the statistics are pretty stark. 73% of college grads in the DR have formal jobs.
Oh.
But that number plummets to only 12% for those with no education.
Wow.
That gap is a powerful illustration, I think, of how informality is tied to poverty and lack of opportunity.
So I guess without education, people have fewer options, and they might not even understand the complexities of the formal system.
Precisely. They may lack the skills to run a formal business or even navigate the process of registering one.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about taxes. I think there's a common misconception that informal workers pay no taxes at all.
That's not entirely true. The Dominican Republic actually has ways to collect taxes even from informal workers. Yeah, for example, they collect sales tax, known as ITBIS or value-added tax, and they can withhold income tax called ISR when informal workers provide services to formal companies.
Oh, interesting. So they're not completely off the grid when it comes to taxes.
Not at all. In fact, the DR collects about 0.4% of its GDP each year from informal workers through these methods. To give you an idea, that's more than they collect from gambling taxes.
Oh, wow. That's a lot more significant than I would have guessed. But I'm guessing there's still a fair bit of tax evasion happening.
Absolutely. The biggest loophole is that transactions between informal workers or businesses themselves aren't taxed.
Right.
And a lot of employers in the informal sector just don't register their employees to avoid Social Security payments.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough situation.
Yeah. So while there are mechanisms in place, there's still a significant amount of economic activity happening under the radar.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like, working informally might seem easier in the short term. Less paperwork, maybe lower upfront costs. But in the long run, it could actually hold those businesses back.
Yeah, it's a classic trade-off. While there might be these initial perceived advantages, research shows that formal businesses simply grow faster and create more jobs.
It makes sense.
This is because informal businesses often struggle to, secure contracts with larger companies.
Right.
Because those larger companies demand formal suppliers. And often they can't access bank loans, which of course limits their growth potential.
I imagine that lack of access to financing can be a major obstacle for anyone trying to expand.
Oh, absolutely. It can really create a bottleneck for growth and innovation.
It seems like they hit a ceiling, that point where informality, instead of being a stepping stone, becomes a barrier to further growth.
Exactly. And that's a great point, and to their credit, a lot of these businesses recognize that.
Yeah.
They know that if they want to take their business to the next level, they need to formalize.
So what happens next?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and that's what we're going to dive into in the next segment.
Okay, great.
We'll explore some real-world examples that might offer some clues about, the path forward.
All right, sounds good. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. We've been unpacking the complexities of informality in the Dominican Republic.
It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, exploring all the challenges and potential solutions. Now, I think it's time to shift gears a little bit and delve into some real-world examples that might offer some clues about, the path forward.
In the last segment, we talked about simplifying the tax system as a major way to encourage formalization. But it's not just about making things easier, right?
Right.
The research also emphasizes making it more advantageous to actually be a formal business.
Precisely, and one way that plays out is through interactions with formal companies. The research we've been discussing found that informal businesses in the DR often start to formalize when they begin doing business with, formal companies.
That makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, if you're suddenly dealing with clients who expect invoices and contracts and proof of tax compliance, you're going to have to adapt to those standards.
Exactly. It's a ripple effect. A formal company might initially buy goods or services from an informal supplier, and there are actually mechanisms in place for them to deduct those expenses, even from informal providers. But as that informal supplier gets more and more formal clients, the need to formalize their own business becomes increasingly apparent.
So they're almost pulled into the formal system through those business relationships.
Yeah, they kind of have to.
What are some of the specific benefits that the research highlights for these businesses once they make that transition?
Well, one of the most significant is a potential reduction in their overall tax burden. We talked earlier about how informal workers often face higher withholding rates.
Right.
It might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes operating informally can lead to paying more in taxes.
Because you're outside the regular tax system, which often has more favorable rates and deductions for formal businesses.
Exactly. So formalizing can be a really smart financial move, not just a matter of avoiding paperwork.
Plus, there are those less tangible but equally important benefits, right?
Right.
Like increased trust and credibility with clients.
Absolutely. Being a formal business allows you to compete for government contracts, which can be a huge boost for growth.
And of course, access to financing, that's a game changer. Banks are far more likely to lend money to a formal business that can demonstrate financial stability.
Right. Formalization can open so many doors to affordable loans that can help businesses invest, expand, and ultimately thrive.
So we've covered kind of the why of formalization. Now let's delve into the how. The research highlights some fascinating models that are worth exploring, like cooperatives. How can they help bridge the gap to formality?
Cooperatives offer a really powerful solution, especially when you consider the challenges of financing in the informal sector. Informal workers often have very limited options.
Right.
And, many turn to informal lenders who charge just exorbitant interest rates.
It's a predatory cycle that keeps people trapped in a system that works against them.
Precisely. Cooperatives provide a way out. They offer access to affordable loans, savings plans, and even micro-insurance.
Wow.
All essential tools for building a more stable financial foundation.
It sounds like they're not just offering a financial lifeline, they're providing the means for people to empower themselves.
Right.
To take control of their own financial futures.
That's a great way to put it. They foster a sense of community and shared responsibility, which can be incredibly empowering. And it goes beyond just financial support. Cooperatives also create opportunities for collective bargaining, enabling workers to negotiate for better wages and working conditions.
So it's about creating a system where everyone has a voice and a stake in their own success.
Exactly. And they often provide valuable training and education in areas like business management and financial literacy, equipping people with the skills they need to actually thrive in the formal economy.
It's like a holistic approach to empowerment, providing both the tangible resources and the knowledge and skills to actually make the most of them. Now, another exciting avenue the research explores is the power of digital payments.
Right.
They highlight this incredible success story in Brazil called PIX.
Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah. It's a free instant payment system that's just taken Brazil by storm.
Yeah.
It's even more popular than credit cards there now. But what makes it so successful?
Well, its simplicity is key. Imagine scanning a QR code with your phone, and instantly the money is transferred. No fees, no waiting. It's so intuitive that even street vendors and informal businesses have adopted it with ease.
That's incredible. It sounds like a brilliant way to integrate informal businesses into the digital economy.
It has been transformative. And it's not just about convenience. This shift to digital transactions creates a trail of data that can be invaluable for those in the informal sector. It allows them to demonstrate financial stability, potentially access credit, and even consider formalizing their businesses.
So it's a gateway to the formal financial system.
Precisely, it creates a bridge between these two worlds that were previously quite separate.
It's amazing to see how technology can be harnessed to break down those barriers and promote financial inclusion. Now, alongside these innovative solutions, there are also more traditional policy approaches that can play a significant role in encouraging formalization.
Right.
The research emphasizes this ongoing need to simplify the tax system and reduce the administrative burden of becoming a formal business.
The Dominican Republic has already taken steps in this direction with programs like Burocracia Zero, which means bureaucracy zero, and Formalizate, which means formalize yourself.
Okay.
These initiatives are designed to streamline the process of registering a business and make it more accessible to, small entrepreneurs.
It's encouraging to see those efforts being made.
Yeah.
Are there any specific recommendations from the research on how these programs could be further improved?
The research suggests looking at models like the monotributo, which has been so successful in other Latin American countries. Remember, this system combines all taxes and Social Security payments into one simplified payment, making compliance much easier for small businesses.
Yeah, it seems like that could make a huge difference in removing the fear and confusion that often surrounds the tax system.
Exactly. And it's not just about making it easier, it's about making it beneficial. By simplifying the process and making it more transparent, we can encourage more people to participate in the formal economy.
It's about creating a system that's fair, accessible, and ultimately benefits everyone.
Precisely. Now, it's important to remember that none of these solutions will work in isolation. It requires a multi-pronged approach that addresses the root causes of informality.
So we're talking about a holistic strategy that includes investing in education and training, creating a more supportive regulatory environment, and fostering collaboration between the formal and informal sectors.
Exactly. We need to move away from the mindset that informality is simply a problem to be eradicated, and instead focus on creating a system that empowers individuals and communities to thrive.
It's about recognizing the contributions of those in the informal sector and providing them with the support and resources they need to succeed. And this brings up an essential point highlighted in the research. Reducing informality isn't just a task for the government.
Right.
It requires a collective effort from various stakeholders.
You're absolutely right. The private sector, cooperatives, financial institutions, and even informal workers themselves all have a role to play in creating a more equitable and sustainable economy.
It's about collaboration, shared responsibility, and a commitment to creating a system that works for everyone. It's exciting to see that other countries have successfully implemented policies that have dramatically reduced informality and created a more inclusive economic landscape.
The challenge now is to learn from those successes, adapt those lessons to the Dominican Republic's unique context, and forge a path forward that benefits all Dominicans.
We've explored the complexities of informality, delved into potential solutions, and highlighted the importance of collaboration. But as we discussed earlier, there's one more crucial element we need to address: the human element.
It's easy to get lost in the numbers and policy discussions, but at the end of the day, we're talking about people's lives.
Right.
We're talking about creating a system where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, build a better future for themselves and their families.
And that's why we need to hear from those who have lived and worked within this system. So, in our final segment, we'll be speaking with a Dominican entrepreneur named Carlos.
Okay.
His story provides a powerful illustration of both the challenges and opportunities of navigating the informal economy. So we've spent this episode unpacking the complexities of informality in the Dominican Republic, the challenges, the potential solutions, and we've talked a lot about the importance of a collaborative approach. But, sometimes statistics and policy discussions can feel a bit abstract.
It can be hard to wrap your head around it.
Right, so to bring this issue to life, we have a fascinating story to share.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to speak with Carlos,
Oh, cool.
a Dominican entrepreneur who's built a really thriving business in the tourism sector, but his journey began in the informal economy, so he faced a lot of the hurdles that we've been talking about.
So his story is kind of like a testament to that resilience and entrepreneurial spirit that we see so often in the DR.
Right.
But it also kind of highlights those systemic barriers that can make success so much harder for people starting out in the informal economy.
Definitely.
So tell me a little bit about Carlos. How did he get started?
Well, he started out really small, Selling souvenirs to tourists on the beach, no formal business registration, no contracts, just, him and his hustle.
That's a scene we've all witnessed in tourist destinations.
Right.
Those informal vendors are often the first people to welcome visitors, and they offer a real glimpse into the local culture and craftsmanship.
Exactly. And for many, like Carlos, it's a way to make ends meet, to support their families. But it also comes with a lot of uncertainty and vulnerability.
So what were some of the specific challenges that Carlos told you about?
Well, he talked about the constant fear of being harassed by authorities. He didn't have permits. He was always worried about getting in trouble.
Oh, wow.
He also mentioned the lack of access to credit to grow his business,
Yeah.
And the struggle to compete with those larger, more established companies that have, more resources.
He was operating in a system that really didn't offer much protection or support.
Sadly, that's the case for many.
So for him and for many others, informality isn't really a choice. It's just, it's a necessity born out of limited options.
Yeah.
But Carlos didn't let those challenges stop him. He had a vision for his business, and he was determined to make it a reality.
Oh, yeah. He's a real go-getter. He started small, but he was really smart about it. He reinvested every peso he earned back into his business.
That's smart.
He built relationships with local artisans, expanded his product line, and eventually he saved enough money to rent a small shop. It's actually pretty remarkable what he was able to accomplish with, such limited resources.
It really speaks to his drive and his resourcefulness. But as his business grew, did he start to encounter those limitations of operating informally that we talked about earlier?
He did. He told us that securing contracts with, larger hotels or tour operators became nearly impossible because they insisted on working with formal suppliers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And without access to bank loans, he couldn't invest in new equipment or inventory that could have helped his business grow even further.
So he kind of hit that ceiling that we talked about, that point where informality, instead of being a stepping stone, becomes a barrier to further growth.
Exactly. And to his credit, Carlos recognized that. He knew that if he wanted to take his business to the next level, he needed to formalize.
So what was that process like for him? I mean, I imagine it can feel pretty daunting, especially for someone who's been operating independently for so long.
He said it was really overwhelming at first. The paperwork, the fees, the regulations, it felt like a mountain to climb.
I bet.
But he was determined. He reached out to a local business development center and got help navigating the process. He was able to register his business, obtain the necessary permits, and eventually he became a fully formal enterprise.
Wow, that's a great example of how those support systems can make such a huge difference. He didn't have to figure it all out on his own.
It really makes a difference having someone in your corner.
Right, so the process wasn't easy, but the benefits were worth it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was able to secure those contracts with those larger hotels, access credit to invest in his business, and he even began creating jobs for other people in his community. It's pretty powerful to see the effects of formalization.
It's a win-win situation. His business thrived, he's contributing to the formal economy, and he's creating opportunities for others. But did he encounter any challenges during this transition? I mean, it must have been a big adjustment after years of operating informally.
Yeah, he admitted there were some hurdles, like learning a whole new set of skills, bookkeeping, marketing, managing employees.
Yeah, it's a lot to learn.
It was a lot to take on, but he embraced the challenge and his dedication really paid off.
It's truly inspiring to hear how he persevered and ultimately achieved his goals. It really does speak volumes about his resilience and his commitment to building a sustainable business.
Absolutely. And his story kind of highlights something really important. Creating pathways for informal businesses to transition to the formal economy isn't just about simplifying regulations and providing access to resources. It's also about education and support. Carlos wouldn't have succeeded without the guidance he received from that business development center.
It's a great example of the power of those support systems, organizations, and individuals who can help guide people through the process, offer advice, and help them navigate all the complexities of the formal economy.
Definitely. And, it's not just about Carlos and his individual success story. It's about creating a ripple effect. Now that his business is thriving, he started mentoring other aspiring entrepreneurs, guiding them along the path to formality and helping them build successful businesses of their own.
That's fantastic. He's not only achieved success himself, but he's now paying it forward and empowering others to do the same.
It's a perfect example of how creating a more inclusive economy can have a positive impact on the entire community.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more equitable and sustainable system, whether it's through supporting local businesses, advocating for policy changes, or even just sharing stories like Carlos's. We can all contribute to building a better future for everyone.
I think that's a great takeaway.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into informality in the Dominican Republic, what are some of the key takeaways we want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think we've learned that informality is a really complex issue, but it's not insurmountable. There are solutions, and those solutions require a multifaceted approach that involves simplifying regulations, providing access to resources, and fostering collaboration between all the various stakeholders.
And we've also seen that there's a human face to this issue. Behind the statistics and the economic indicators are individuals like Carlos, whose stories remind us that we're not just talking about numbers. We're talking about people's lives, their dreams, and their potential to contribute to a thriving economy.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about creating an environment where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of where they start their journey. It's about building a more just and equitable system that empowers individuals, strengthens communities, and fosters sustainable growth.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained a new perspective on this complex issue and are inspired to continue exploring it further. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.